400 guests, crystal chandeliers, a pregnant woman in a midnight blue gown, standing 6 feet from her husband as he leaned into the microphone and called her worthless. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't run, but her father stood up. Edmund Prescott, self-made billionaire, the kind of man who never raises his voice because he doesn't need to. He walked to that podium with the calm of someone who has already decided how this ends. And what he did next, no one in that ballroom will ever forget it. But here's what Garrett didn't know. His wife had already found the credit card statements. The secret hotel charges 12 miles from their home. The forged signature worth $300,000. The file on his laptop documenting her tears to steal custody of their unborn child. He thought he married a quiet woman. He married a Prescott. And Prescott, women don't break. They transform. This is the story of a woman who was called worthless by the man who was supposed to love her most, and how she became the most valuable person in the room. Stay until the end, because the moment her father speaks at that second gala will leave you speechless. Message and lesson. This story carries a truth that every woman needs to hear. Your worth is never defined by the person standing next to you. It is defined by the person standing inside you. When someone calls you worthless, that is not a fact. That is a confession. A confession that they have nothing left to offer, and walking away from someone who diminishes you is not losing. It is the most powerful thing you will ever do. If this story touched something real inside you, leave a comment and tell me. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the father's speech, the mechanic who chose his daughter-in-law over his own son, or the letter she wrote to her unborn baby? Share this with a woman who needs to hear it today. Someone who has been made to feel small. Someone who forgot how strong she is. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Every week, we bring you stories about women who rise. Make sure you're here for the next one. Say that again. Edmund Prescott's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade wrapped in velvet. The champagne flutes stopped clinking. 400 guests turned their heads. The string quartet's violins trailed off one by one, leaving nothing but silence and the soft hum of crystal chandeliers above. Charlotte Prescott Aldridge stood near the edge of the stage, her hand resting on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, midnight blue gown, diamond earrings her mother had clasped on just 2 hours ago. She looked beautiful. She felt like she was drowning. Garrett was at the podium, her husband, the man who had kissed her forehead that morning and whispered, "You look incredible, Lottie." The man who had straightened his bow tie in the mirror and smiled at her reflection like she was the only woman in the world. Now he stood under the spotlight with a glass of scotch in his hand and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He had been giving a toast. The annual speech honoring her father's charitable legacy. It was supposed to be gracious, warm, the kind of thing a devoted son-in-law says when 400 wealthy donors are watching. Instead, Garrett had veered off script. "My wife," he had said, swirling his drink. "Charlotte. She's many things. Beautiful? Sure. Educated? Absolutely. But let's be honest here tonight, among friends." He paused, chuckled. "Without her daddy's money, she'd be worthless." The word landed like a slap. Not a gasp, something worse, silence. The kind of silence that happens when 400 people simultaneously hold their breath and look anywhere except at the pregnant woman standing 6 feet from the podium. Charlotte's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. The tablecloth bunched under her grip. White linen, starched, perfect. Like everything else in this room that was about to shatter. The microphone fed back, a high, thin screech that matched the sound inside Charlotte's chest, a sound no one else could hear, the sound of something breaking that would never fit back together the same way. She looked across the ballroom, past the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, past the ice sculptures and the flower arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She found her father. Edmund Prescott stood at his table, 62 years old, silver-haired, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. His napkin was still folded on his lap. His water glass was still in his right hand. He was looking at Garrett the way a man looks at something he's already decided to remove from existence. That stillness. Charlotte knew it well. Edmund Prescott only went still when he was about to dismantle something completely. When other men raised their voices, Edmund lowered his. When other men rushed forward, Edmund went quiet. She had watched him do it in boardrooms, watched him do it when a business partner tried to cheat him out of $12 million, watched him go perfectly, terrifyingly still, and then make one move that ended everything. He set down his water glass, smoothed his tie, stood. The room tracked him like a single organism. Edmund walked toward the podium. He didn't rush. Every step was measured, deliberate. The sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor was the only sound in the entire ballroom. Click, click, click. Garrett's grin faltered, just slightly, just enough. Edmund reached the stage, climbed the 3 steps, stood beside his son-in-law. He was 2 inches shorter than Garrett, but somehow took up twice the space. He reached out and gently, almost tenderly, took the microphone from Garrett's hand, the way you take scissors from a child, not angry, just certain. "My son-in-law," Edmund said, and his voice was warm, conversational, as if they were chatting over coffee. "My son-in-law calls my daughter worthless." He paused, let the word hang in the chandelier light. Interesting word choice from a man whose entire net worth fits in my coat pocket. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back coughed. Edmund smiled, the kind of smile that had built a $3 billion real estate empire from nothing, the kind of smile that meant the conversation was over before the other person realized it had started. "But we'll discuss that privately," Edmund continued. "Tonight is about the children this foundation serves. Children who need hospitals, children who need books, children who need someone to tell them they have worth." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a checkbook, wrote a number, held it up. $2 million additional, tonight, for the Children's Literacy Wing. The room erupted. Applause crashed like a wave. Standing ovation. Edmund had redirected 400 people's attention in under 90 seconds. He handed the microphone to the event coordinator, nodded once, and walked back to his table. Garrett stood on the stage alone, blinking. The applause wasn't for him. The spotlight wasn't on him anymore. He had been publicly neutralized without Edmund Prescott ever raising his voice. Charlotte didn't see the rest. She was already walking toward the hallway, past the waiters with their silver trays, past the women who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the men who suddenly found their cufflinks fascinating. She found the bathroom, pushed open the heavy oak door, walked past the marble sinks and the orchid arrangement and the little basket of hand towels monogrammed with the hotel's initials. She entered the last stall, locked it, and sat down on the cold tile floor in her $3,000 gown. Her hand found her belly. The baby kicked, hard, right against her palm, as if the baby knew, as if the baby was saying, "I'm here, I heard it too." "Your daddy just called us worthless, little one," Charlotte whispered, "in front of everyone we know." She didn't cry, not yet. The shock was too complete for tears. Tears require processing. Tears require understanding. And Charlotte didn't understand anything right now except the cold tile under her legs and the warm life moving under her hand and the word worthless echoing in the space between her ribs. She pulled out her phone, opened his text from that morning. 9:14, a photo of her sleeping, hair fanned across the pillow, morning light on her face, his caption, "You look beautiful, can't wait for tonight." She read it 3 times. Lock, unlock, read, lock, unlock, read, lock, unlock, read. As if reading it enough times would make it true again. As if the man who sent that text and the man at the podium were 2 different people, and she just had to find the one she married. The baby kicked again. Charlotte closed her eyes, pressed her back against the stall wall, breathed. 3 minutes passed. Maybe 5. Time does strange things when your world fractures. She stood, smoothed her gown, wiped her face even though there was nothing to wipe, unlocked the stall, washed her hands because that's what you do, checked her reflection, same face, same earrings, same woman who walked into this gala believing her husband loved her. She stepped into the hallway and froze, 20 feet away, near the coat check. Garrett. His back was to her. His hand was on the lower back of a woman Charlotte had never seen before, a blonde in a red dress, young, laughing at something he said. Garrett leaned in close, too close, his lips near her ear. They didn't see Charlotte. But Charlotte saw everything. The hand on the lower back, the lean, the laugh, the intimacy of the gesture. The kind of touch that doesn't happen between colleagues. The kind of touch that has history behind it. Repetition. Comfort. Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. The baby went still, as if sensing the surge of adrenaline. She stepped backward, quietly, into the shadow of the hallway. Watched for 3 more seconds, 4, 5. Then she turned and walked away. Her heels made no sound on the carpet. The car ride home was 12 minutes of silence, broken only by the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement. It had started raining. Of course it had. The universe has a terrible sense of timing. Garrett drove. He was drunk, but not drunk enough to slur, just drunk enough to be reckless. Charlotte sat in the passenger seat, with her hands folded over her belly. The leather seat was cold against her back. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that sounded like the word she couldn't stop hearing. Worthless, worthless, worthless. "You're quiet," Garrett said. Charlotte stared at the rain streaking across her window. Each droplet caught the streetlight and turned gold for a second before sliding away. "It was a joke, Lottie," he sighed, the way he always sighed, as if her feelings were an inconvenience he had to manage. "God, you're so sensitive lately. The hormones are making you—" Who was she? Not a question, a statement. Charlotte's voice was flat and calm in a way that surprised them both. Garrett's hands tightened on the steering wheel, just slightly, just enough. "Who was who?" "The blonde, red dress, your hand on her back by the coat check." A beat of silence. The wipers swept left, right left. "She's nobody," Garrett said. "A colleague from the firm. Sloan something. We were just talking about a deal. You were whispering in her ear. Charlotte." He said her full name. He only used her full name when he was about to make her feel crazy. "I was talking in a loud hallway at a loud event. That's how people talk in loud places. Can we not do this tonight? You're 7 months pregnant. You should be resting, not interrogating me over nothing." His phone buzzed in the cup holder between them. The screen lit up. Charlotte saw the notification before Garrett flipped the phone face down. One word of the name, just one letter, really. S. "Your phone," Charlotte said. "Work email. I'll check it later." They pulled into the driveway of their brownstone. The house she had bought with her trust fund. The house Garrett called ours when friends visited And yours when they argued. He killed the engine, sat for a moment, then reached over and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry about the speech. Too much scotch. I'll call your dad tomorrow and apologize. Okay? His hand was warm. His eyes were soft. He looked exactly like the man she married. And that was the most terrifying part, because the man she married wouldn't have said that word. The man she married wouldn't have touched another woman's back like that. The man she married didn't exist. Maybe never had. Okay, Charlotte said. Because that's what she always said. They went inside. Garrett disappeared into the guest room. His choice lately. He said he didn't want to disturb her sleep with his snoring. She used to believe that. Charlotte stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. She opened the refrigerator, closed it, opened the pantry, closed it. Not hungry, not thirsty, not anything she could name. She walked to Garrett's home office. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. His desk was neat, always neat. Garrett was meticulous about his workspace. Pens aligned, papers stacked, laptop centered. A man who controlled his environment because he couldn't control anything else. She tried the top drawer. Unlocked pens, sticky notes, a spare phone charger. She tried the second drawer. Locked. Charlotte went to the hallway closet, found his jacket from tonight. The pocket yielded a small brass key. She'd never seen it before. How long had this drawer been locked? How long had she not noticed? Back in the office, key in the lock, turn, click, inside the drawer, credit card statements. Not the card they shared, a different card, one she'd never seen. Charlotte carried the papers to the kitchen table and spread them under the overhead light. Dinners for two. Restaurants she recognized. The ones Garrett told her were client meetings. Osteria, Sophia, Le Bernardin, Café Billionaire. Every entry for 2 covers. Every date a night he said he was working late. A receipt from a jewelry store. $4,200. A necklace. Charlotte touched her bare throat. She had never received a necklace. A hotel charge. The Langham. December 14th. The night Garrett said he had flown to Boston for a conference. Charlotte pulled up the hotel's address on her phone. 12 miles from their house. He hadn't gone to Boston. He had gone 12 miles and lied about 300. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen table, lowered herself into a chair. The credit card statements blurred in front of her eyes. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw tonight. And now I know what I've been missing for months. Maybe longer. The signs were there. The late nights. The new cologne. The way he angled his phone away from me. The way he stopped reaching for me in bed. I'm not crazy. I was just trusting him. The baby shifted inside her, a slow roll, left to right, as if turning away from the truth, too. Charlotte picked up her phone. 1:17 in the morning. She dialed Margot. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click. Lottie? Margot's voice was groggy, but alert. Best friends answer at 1 in the morning. That's the rule. That's the unspoken contract that separates best friends from everyone else. I found something, Charlotte said. She was surprised by how steady her voice was. Credit card statements. A hotel 12 miles from here on a night he said he was in Boston. Dinners for 2 at every restaurant he told me was a client meeting. A necklace I never received. Silence. Not the thinking kind of silence. The guilty kind. Margot? More silence. Margot, you're not saying anything. She heard Margot inhale, a long, shaking breath, the kind of breath you take before you confess something that will ruin everything. I didn't know for sure, Lottie, Margot's voice cracked, but I saw them, together, 3 months ago, at Café Billionaire. They were at a corner table, his hand on hers. He didn't see me. I left before they noticed. Charlotte's vision tunneled. The kitchen shrank to a pinpoint. 3 months. I wanted to tell you. I've been trying to find the right. Charlotte hung up. She set the phone on the table, face down, precisely in the center, the way Garrett placed his laptop, and she sat there, in the kitchen of the house she'd bought, at the table where she'd told Garrett she was pregnant, wearing the gown she'd chosen for a night that was supposed to celebrate her father's legacy. 3 months. Margot had known for 3 months. Garrett had been lying for longer than that. The credit card statements went back 18 months. 2 betrayals in one night. Her husband, her best friend. Charlotte looked down at her belly. The baby was quiet now, sleeping maybe, unaware that the architecture of its family was collapsing while it dreamed. She pressed her palms flat on the table, felt the wood grain under her fingertips. Solid, real, something she could trust. Okay, she whispered to no one. Okay. She didn't know what that word meant yet, but she said it anyway, because sometimes okay isn't a statement of fact. It's a decision to keep breathing when everything in your body tells you to stop. Morning came the way mornings do when you haven't slept, not gradually. All at once, the kitchen filled with gray light and Charlotte was still at the table. The credit card statements were still spread in front of her. The coffee she'd made at 4 in the morning had gone cold in its mug, bitter, like everything else. She heard Garrett's footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the third step, the shuffle of his slippers on the hardwood. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in a t-shirt and sweatpants, rubbing his eyes, hungover but functional. "Morning, babe," he said, yawned, poured himself coffee without noticing hers was untouched. "I was thinking we could do brunch at the club. The weather's supposed to clear up." Charlotte stared at him. She studied his face the way you study a painting you've just discovered is a forgery. The brush strokes are the same. The colors are right. But now that you know, you can see where the hand wavered, where the technique fell short, where the lie lives in the details. He looked the same. Brown hair, slightly tousled, strong jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. Green eyes that used to make her feel safe. She had loved this face, had traced its lines in the dark, had watched it sleep and felt grateful. Now she watched it lie. "Sure," Charlotte said. "Brunch sounds nice." She swept the credit card statements off the table while he wasn't looking, tucked them into her purse, smiled. Garrett kissed the top of her head on his way to the shower, his lips on her hair. A habit, muscle memory, not love. She knew the difference now. While the shower ran, Charlotte sat on the bed she'd made at 5 that morning. Hospital corners, sheets pulled tight, duvet smoothed until every wrinkle was gone. She'd spent 20 minutes on it, adjusting, perfecting, folding the edges with a precision that would make a drill sergeant proud. If the bed was perfect, maybe everything else could be too. It couldn't. She knew that. But she made the bed anyway, because that's what you do when the world falls apart. You find one small thing you can control. You make it perfect. And you pretend, just for a moment, that perfection is enough. She drove to her parents' estate after brunch. Garrett didn't ask where she was going. He never did anymore. The Prescott estate sat on 14 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut. Stone walls, iron gates, a half-mile driveway lined with maple trees that turned gold in October. Charlotte had grown up here, had ridden her bicycle down this driveway, had fallen and scraped her knee on this gravel, and run crying to her father, who picked her up and said, "Prescotts fall down, sweetheart, then they get up." She parked in the circular drive and let herself in through the kitchen door. The house smelled like fresh bread. Vivian's doing. Her mother baked when she was worried. Sourdough today. That meant she was very worried. Charlotte found Edmund in his study. The room hadn't changed in 30 years. Mahogany desk, Built-in bookshelves, floor to ceiling, a leather chair that had molded to Edmund's shape over decades of late-night reading, the grandfather clock in the corner ticking its steady, patient rhythm. Edmund was reading. He looked up when she entered, set down his glasses, said nothing. He already knew why she was there. Charlotte sat in the leather chair opposite his desk, the one she'd sat in since she was 5 years old. Her feet used to dangle. Now they touched the floor, but the feeling was the same. Safety. The smell of old books and pipe tobacco. Edmund had quit smoking 15 years ago, but the leather never forgot. She placed the credit card statements on his desk. Edmund put his glasses back on. Read each one, slowly, methodically, the way he read contracts, the way he read anything that mattered. He didn't speak, didn't react. His face was stone. When he finished, he folded his glasses, set them on the desk, aligned them with the edge, a habit Charlotte had inherited. The need for order when everything is chaos. "What do you want to do?" Edmund said. Not what he would do, not what she should do, what she wanted to do. This was how Edmund raised her, to make her own choices, to own her own decisions. He never swooped in, never fixed things without permission. He gave her the tools and the space, and then he waited, even now. Even when every fatherly instinct must have been screaming at him to destroy Garrett Aldridge with a single phone call. "I don't know yet," Charlotte said. Edmund nodded. "Take your time." The grandfather clock ticked. Talekt, ticked. Outside, the gardener's shears clipped the hedges. A normal sound. A safe sound. Charlotte closed her eyes and let herself be 5 years old again, just for a minute. The chair held her. The room held her. The ticking clock counted seconds that didn't hurt. "He's been cheating on me," she said. "At least 18 months, maybe longer." "I know," Edmund said quietly. Charlotte opened her eyes. "You know?" "I suspected. After the gala last night, I made a phone call. A man who calls his pregnant wife worthless in public has something larger to hide. Cruelty that bold is always covering something." He paused. "I'm sorry I was right." Vivian found Charlotte in the garden an hour later. Her mother moved through the rose beds in a cream cashmere sweater and gardening gloves that had never touched actual dirt. Vivian Prescott was 59 years old and looked 45. She carried her beauty the way old money carries wealth. Effortlessly, invisibly, as though it had always been there and always would be, they walked the grounds together, mother and daughter, their shoes crunched on the gravel path. The September air smelled like cut grass and impending rain. Vivian didn't offer advice. Instead, she told a story. 30 years ago, Vivian said, your father had a business partner, Richard Holloway. They built their first development together, a shopping complex in Stamford, 50-50 split. One day your father discovered Richard had been skimming profits, not much, 3%. But over time, it added up to nearly $2 million. Charlotte listened. The gravel crunched. Your father didn't confront him, Vivian continued. Didn't yell, didn't threaten. He went quiet. For 6 weeks, he gathered information, documented every discrepancy, built a case so airtight that when he finally sat Richard down, there was nothing to argue. No defense, no excuse, or shishot. Richard signed over his share of the company that afternoon. Vivian stopped walking, turned to her daughter. Your father doesn't get angry, darling. He gets us strategic, and he taught you to do the same. Charlotte returned home at 4 in the afternoon. The house was quiet. Garrett was at the gym, or wherever he actually went when he said he was at the gym. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, charging, face up. It buzzed. Charlotte looked. A text from SW. She picked up the phone. Garrett didn't use a passcode. He never had. The confidence of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. The message was still on the lock screen. Last night was close. She almost saw us. We need to be more careful. Missing you already. Charlotte's throat tightened, but her hands didn't shake. Something had shifted inside her. Somewhere between the cold bathroom tile last night and her father's study this morning, the grief had begun to harden into something else. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, clearer. The beginning of a plan she didn't have words for yet. She photographed the text, then scrolled through his messages with SW dozens, hundreds, going back months, pet names, plans, promises. She photographed everything. Then she opened his email and found something far worse than an affair. Garrett had been in communication with a divorce attorney, a man named Philip Kessler, specializing in high net worth separations. The emails went back 6 months. Garrett wasn't just cheating. He was planning to leave her, but not before securing his claim to Prescott family money through the baby. Custody leverage, community property arguments, financial claims through paternal rights. Every email was calculated. Strategic, cold. Charlotte set the phone down, exactly where she'd found it. Same angle, same position. She wiped her fingerprints with her sleeve. The shower started upstairs. Garrett was home. She hadn't heard him come in. She sat at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and waited for him to come downstairs so she could smile at him across the dinner she would cook. Because the most dangerous thing a woman can do when she discovers the truth is pretend she hasn't. The forensic accountant's name was Helen Drucker. She was 53, silver-haired, and had the demeanor of someone who had spent 3 decades finding money that men had tried to hide. She sat across from Edmund and Charlotte in Russell Pennington's law office on a Tuesday morning, 4 days after the gala. "Your husband has been systematic," Helen said. She laid out spreadsheets on the conference table, color-coded, highlighted, annotated. Over the past 18 months, he has made 114 separate transfers from your joint household account to a personal account you are not named on. Each transfer was under $2,000, small enough to avoid triggering bank alerts. The total is $87,400. Charlotte stared at the numbers. Each one a dinner she thought they'd shared. A weekend she thought was special. A life she thought was real. But that's not the worst of it, Helen continued. She slid another document across the table. 6 months ago, your husband took a loan of $300,000 from a man named Victor Hale. Russell leaned forward. Victor Hale is a predatory lender. He operates on the edge of legality, targets men who are over-leveraged and desperate. His interest rates are criminal, and his enforcement methods are worse. The loan paperwork, Helen said, pointing to a highlighted section, lists your husband's expected inheritance through marriage as collateral. Charlotte read the line, then read it again. Expected inheritance through marriage. Her family's wealth, her father's life's work, reduced to collateral, on a loan from a predator. But Helen wasn't finished. There's a supplementary document attached to the loan agreement. She slid it across. A co-guarantee form. It bears your signature, Charlotte. It claims you co-signed the loan and pledged Prescott family assets as security. Charlotte looked at the signature, her name, her handwriting, except it wasn't. The C was wrong. Charlotte always looped her C. This one was angular, sharp, close enough to fool a lender who wasn't looking carefully, not close enough to fool the woman whose name it was. I didn't sign this, Charlotte said. We know, Russell replied. That's forgery. A federal offense. The tears were gone now. Something hotter replaced them. Charlotte stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the street 14 floors below. People walked to lunch, carried briefcases, checked their phones. Normal people, living normal lives. while hers detonated in a conference room above them. He wasn't just cheating, he was engineering her destruction. Every time she cried and he said, "You're being hormonal," he was writing it down. She had found a file on his laptop labeled "C Behavior Log." Dates, incidents, quotes taken out of context. He was documenting her emotional responses during pregnancy to build a custody case, making her look unstable, erratic, unfit. Every argument she started because something felt wrong, documented. Every night she couldn't sleep and wandered the house, noted. Every time she asked him where he'd been and he called her paranoid, recorded. He was making her look crazy, and she'd been helping him do it. "What do we do?" Charlotte said. Not a question, a command. Edmund, who had been silent throughout the presentation, put on his reading glasses, reviewed every document one more time. Then he took out his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Russell. Prepare everything: divorce filing, asset protection, criminal referral. The second was to the forensic accountant. I want a complete trace on Victor Hale's organization. Every entity, every connection. The third he took in another room. Charlotte didn't hear it. When he returned, his expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had sharpened. The look of a man who had identified a problem and already designed the solution. "He made one mistake, sweetheart," Edmund said. "He forgot whose daughter you are." That evening, Charlotte called Douglas Aldridge, Garrett's father. The conversation she dreaded most. Douglas picked up on the second ring. His voice was rough. Working-class Ohio, a man who had spent 40 years under the hoods of other people's cars. Charlotte had always liked him. He was kind in a way that was simple and real. He sent birthday cards that arrived on time. He asked about the baby with genuine excitement. He called Charlotte sweetheart and meant it. "I'm calling to ask you something," Charlotte said. "And I need you to be honest with me, Douglas." "Always, sweetheart." "Did you know about Garrett and the woman from his office?" A pause, long, heavy. She heard him set something down, a coffee mug maybe, or a wrench. "I didn't know it had gone this far," Douglas said. His voice cracked on the last word. "He brought a girl to the shop last spring, introduced her as a friend, Sloane. Pretty girl, young. The way she looked at him, I recognized it. His mother used to look at other men the same way when she thought I wasn't watching." He cleared his throat. "I raised him better than this, Charlotte. Or I thought I did. His mother leaving when he was 9. But it broke something in him, but that's an explanation. It's not an excuse, and I want you to know that." Charlotte gripped the phone. Her throat ached. "I'm so sorry," Douglas said. "I'm so sorry my son did this to you. I deserved better than this. My baby deserves better than this." The thought came clear and unbidden, not as a question, not as a hope, as a fact, simple and bright and unshakable. She thanked Douglas, hung up, sat in the quiet of her living room, and made a decision. She wouldn't confront Garrett, not yet, not until everything was in place. Instead, she would become the wife he expected, warm, compliant, unsuspecting. She would watch him relax, watch him think he'd won, study his patterns, when he left, where he went, what he said, who he texted. She smiled at him across the dinner table that night, asked about his day, laughed at his joke about a coworker, passed him the bread basket with both hands, and the whole time she was memorizing him. Not as a wife memorizes a husband, as a detective memorizes a suspect. The tells, the lies, the micro-expressions that gave him away. Because that's what he was now, not her husband, not her partner, her opponent. And Charlotte Prescott had been raised by the best strategist in the business. 3 days later, Margot showed up at the front door. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, rain in her hair, shaking. "I need to tell you everything," Margot said. "All of it. Even the parts you don't want to hear." Charlotte opened the door wider and let the last person who owed her the truth walk in. They sat on the kitchen floor, two grown women on cold tile, Margot with mascara tracking down her cheeks, Charlotte with her belly between her crossed legs. The overhead light was too bright, but neither moved to dim it. The refrigerator hummed. The ice maker dropped cubes. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The mundane percussion of a life still running while everything inside it burned. "Start from the beginning," Charlotte said. Margot wiped her nose with her sleeve, a gesture too human for her usual polished exterior. Margot Calloway planned galas and gallery openings for a living. She wore silk blouses and spoke in carefully constructed sentences. She did not sit on kitchen floors with ruined makeup. But grief, Charlotte was learning, strips away everything decorative and leaves you with what's underneath. 3 months ago, Margot said, Café Billionaire. I was meeting a client for lunch. I got there early, sat at the bar, and I saw them. Garrett and Sloane, at a corner table, near the window, his hand on hers, not on top, threaded through, fingers interlaced. The way you hold someone you've held before. Charlotte's jaw tightened. She said nothing. "I froze," says, Margot continued. "I just sat there with my menu and watched." They were laughing. He leaned over and pushed her hair behind her ear, and she looked at him the way you used to look at him, at the beginning, when you still believed. "What did you do?" "I left before they saw me, walked 3 blocks, threw up in an alley behind a dry cleaner, went home, sat in my car for an hour, and then I did nothing." The word nothing landed heavy on the kitchen tile between them. "He came to see me the next day," Margot said. "At my office. He was calm, charming. He said he knew I'd seen them. He said it was ending. It was a mistake. Charlotte was fragile with the pregnancy, and the stress of knowing would be dangerous for the baby. He begged me not to tell. He said he'd end it that week." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was destroying you, and I kept telling myself, 1 more week. I'll wait 1 more week and see if he ends it. And then another week, and another. 3 months of weeks, Lottie. 3 months of watching you at brunch and baby showers and knowing. Sitting across from you at dinner parties and knowing. Hugging you goodbye and knowing." Margot's voice broke. "I was a coward. I chose the easy path and called it protecting you, but I was protecting myself. From the look on your face right now. This look. The one that tells me you'll never fully trust me again." Charlotte stared at the tile grout between her knees. A thin gray line. Imperfect. Cracked in places. "You're right," Charlotte said. "I don't know if I'll trust you the way I did. Maybe not ever. But I need to know everything. Not for the marriage. For the fight." Margot looked up. "The fight? He's not just cheating, Margot. He's planning to take my money, my reputation, and my baby. And I need to know everything about Sloane Whitfield before I can stop him." Something shifted in Margot's eyes. The guilt didn't leave, but it made room for something else. Purpose. Direction. The particular energy of a woman who has been given a chance to make things right and intends to take it. Margot went to work. As an event planner to the city's wealthiest families, Margot knew everyone. She knew which society wives whispered about whose husbands. She knew which bartenders noticed which couples at which restaurants. She knew within 48 hours exactly who Sloane Whitfield was. Sloane was 29, junior associate at Garrett's firm, ambitious in a way that went beyond career advancement. She'd told 3 different colleagues at 3 different happy hours that she'd be Mrs. Aldridge by Christmas. She'd been posting photos from restaurants Garrett took her to, never showing his face, always angled to show the champagne, the flowers, the view, a curated gallery of someone else's husband. She had no idea about the Prescott fortune's actual structure. She thinks marrying Garrett gives her access to your family's money, Margot said, reading from her notes. She doesn't understand trusts, doesn't understand that the Prescott assets are held in an irrevocable family trust that Garrett has no claim to. She thinks she's marrying into billions. She's marrying into debt. Charlotte almost laughed. Almost. The real intelligence came the following week. Russell Pennington called Charlotte and Edmund to his office. The forensic accounting was complete. Helen Drucker had traced every dollar. The $87,000 from your joint account, that's confirmed, Russell said. But there's a new development, the $300,000 loan from Victor Hale. We've traced Hale's organization more thoroughly. He spread documents across the conference table. Charlotte leaned forward. Victor Hale isn't just a predatory lender, Russell explained. He's connected to a network of individuals who specialize in hostile positions against family-held businesses. The loan to Garrett wasn't random. Hale targeted him specifically because of the Prescott connection. Edmund's expression didn't change, but his hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. Hale's strategy, Russell continued, is to lend to men who are over-leveraged and married into wealth. When they default, and they always default, Hale uses the forged co-guarantee documents to pursue claims against the family assets. He's done this 7 times in the past decade. 3 cases settled quietly. 4 are still in litigation. Charlotte processed this. Garrett wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a mark, a tool in someone else's scheme. And somehow, that made it worse. He had been too stupid and too greedy to see that he was being used. And he had dragged her family into it. $87,000, $300,000 more. He'd sold her, sold their marriage, their baby, her family's name, as collateral for a loan from a predator. Charlotte stood in Russell's office and felt the anger crystallize. Not hot anymore, cold, diamond, hard, and clear. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, the kind that builds. Edmund spoke for the first time that afternoon. Russell, he said, I want the criminal referral filed within 72 hours. I want Hale's operation flagged with the Financial Crimes Division. And I want Charlotte's assets secured in a prenatal trust for my grandchild by end of business Friday. He turned to Charlotte. And I have a plan, he said. A single move. The right moment. But I need you to trust me. And I need you to be patient. What is it? Charlotte asked. Edmund smiled. Not warmth, strategy. The smile that built a $3 billion empire from a $20,000 loan and a 1-room office in Bridgeport. The best deals close when the other side thinks they've already won, he said. Your husband thinks he's winning. Let's make sure he keeps thinking that. Charlotte drove home in silence. No radio, no podcast. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of her own breathing. Her phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, OBGYN appointment. Dr. Elaine Chambers. Tomorrow at 10. She'd almost forgotten. In the chaos of credit card statements and forensic accountants and betrayal layered on betrayal, she had almost forgotten she was growing a person inside her. A person who didn't know about any of this. A person who just needed her to eat well and sleep enough and keep her blood pressure stable. Charlotte placed her hand on her belly. The baby kicked. Hard, insistent, demanding. I know, little one, she whispered. I know. Mama's working on it. Dr. Elaine Chambers had delivered over 3,000 babies in her 20-year career. She had seen every complication, every crisis, every miracle. She had steady hands and kind eyes and a voice that could calm a woman through a Category 5 contraction. So when Dr. Chambers frowned at the blood pressure monitor, Charlotte knew it was bad. 158/97, the nurse read aloud. Dr. Chambers removed the cuff, folded her hands, looked at Charlotte with an expression that combined professional concern with something more personal. She had been Charlotte's doctor for 3 pregnancies, 2 miscarriages, and now this one. The baby they'd finally held on to. The baby Charlotte had spent 2 years trying for. "Charlotte," Dr. Chambers said, "your blood pressure is dangerously elevated. At 7 months, this is a significant risk factor for preeclampsia. If this continues, we're looking at early delivery, possible complications for both you and the baby." Charlotte gripped the paper-covered exam table. The paper crinkled under her fingers. What do I need to do? Whatever is causing stress in your life, and I can see that something is, your body is keeping score. Stress hormones cross the placental barrier. Your baby feels what you feel. I need you to remove the source of your stress, or I'll be delivering this baby 2 months early in a surgical suite. Garrett was in the waiting room. He had insisted on coming, playing the part. When Dr. Chambers delivered the news, he performed concern flawlessly, held Charlotte's hand, asked about monitoring schedules, used words like "we" and "our baby" and "whatever it takes." In the car, his phone rang. He answered it in front of her. "Hey, yeah, no, I'm with Charlotte. Doctor's appointment. No, everything's fine." He laughed at something the caller said. "Tonight, maybe. Let me see." He hung up, noticed Charlotte watching. "Work," he said. "Client dinner. I might need to go out later." Charlotte looked out the window. The city slid past in a blur of concrete and glass and people who had no idea. The hardest part isn't what he's doing. It's watching him pretend to care. The performance is worse than the betrayal, because the betrayal is honest, in its own sick way. The performance is just another lie on top of a mountain of lies. And I'm supposed to sit here and smile. Modified bed rest. That was the prescription. Reduce activity. Reduce stress. Rest. As if rest were possible when your husband was stealing your money, forging your name, sleeping with another woman, and planning to take your baby. But Charlotte rested, because the baby needed her to. 3 days later, 11 at night. Garrett said he was working late. Charlotte was alone in the house. She walked through the dark hallway to the nursery. The room smelled like fresh paint, pale yellow walls, a white crib with a mobile silver stars, a rocking chair by the window, the one she'd found at an antique shop in Vermont and had reupholstered in cream linen, a stuffed elephant on the changing table, gray, soft. She'd bought it the day of the positive test, the day she finally, after 2 years and 2 losses, saw 2 lines. She lowered herself into the rocking chair. It creaked under her weight. The sound of it, rhythmic, old, filled the nursery like a lullaby. "I wanted you to have everything I had," she whispered to her belly. 2 parents who loved each other. Sunday breakfast with pancakes shaped like animals. A dad who carries you on his shoulders at the county fair. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, little one. I'm sorry I chose wrong. I'm sorry I wasn't enough to make him." She stopped, pressed her lips together, breathed through her nose. "No." She said it aloud, firm. "No, that's his voice talking, not mine. I didn't choose wrong because I loved someone. He chose wrong because he didn't. I am enough. I have always been enough. He's the one who isn't." The rocking chair creaked. The mobile turned slowly in a draft from the vent, silver stars catching the moonlight. Charlotte didn't move. She sat in that chair for a long time, an hour, maybe 2. Her phone sat on the changing table, beside the stuffed elephant, its screen dark. She didn't pick it up. Didn't search anything, didn't look for answers she already had. She just sat and rocked and breathed and let the nursery hold her the way her father's study had held her, the way safe places do when the world outside them is falling apart. At 2 in the morning, something woke her, a tightening across her abdomen. Low and deep, she gasped, gripped the arms of the rocking chair. Another tightening, stronger. Contractions. Charlotte fumbled for her phone, called Garrett. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. Hey, this is Garrett. Leave a message. She called again. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. She called Edmund. He answered before the first ring finished. Daddy? She hadn't called him that in years. Something's happening. Contractions. I can't reach Garrett. I'm on my way. Call Dr. Chambers. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Edmund and Vivian arrived in 18. They drove Charlotte to the hospital. The leather seats of Edmund's car, the smell of his cologne, Vivian's hand on hers in the back seat, squeezing in rhythm with the contractions. Breathe, darling. In and out. You're doing fine. Dr. Chambers met them in the labor ward. Monitors, an IV, the baby's heartbeat on the screen. Fast, steady, alive. Charlotte watched it flicker and felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Gratitude. Raw, uncomplicated gratitude for the sound of that heartbeat. Braxton Hicks, doctors. Chambers said after 40 minutes of monitoring. Not true labor, but your blood pressure spiked to 162. Charlotte, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Whatever is happening in your life needs to stop today. Your body cannot sustain this level of stress and maintain this pregnancy safely. Charlotte nodded. She was too tired to speak. Vivian sat beside the hospital bed and brushed Charlotte's hair. Long, slow strokes, the way she had when Charlotte was 7 and had the flu, when Charlotte was 12 and came home crying because a girl at school called her a spoiled brat, when Charlotte was 22 and failed her first job interview. Neither of them spoke. The heart monitor beeped. 2 hearts, Charlotte's and the baby's, steady, strong, despite everything. Those 2 hearts kept beating. In the hallway, Edmund made a phone call. His voice was low, but Charlotte heard one sentence through the cracked door. Move the timeline up, Russell. I want everything ready within 2 weeks. Garrett arrived at the hospital at 3:45 in the morning. His hair was damp. His shirt was buttoned wrong. The second button in the third hole. He smelled like something sweet and sharp. Jasmine. Charlotte recognized it without trying. Sloane's perfume. She had smelled it on his collar before. Had told herself it was the dry cleaner's fabric softener. Babe, I'm so sorry. He rushed to her bedside, took her hand. His eyes were wide, worried. Perfectly performed. My phone died. I was at the office, and my charger broke, and... It's okay, Charlotte said. She let him hold her hand, let him press his lips to her forehead, let him believe she bought it. The jasmine lingered between them like a ghost. The next afternoon, a package arrived at the house. No return address. Charlotte opened it in the kitchen. Inside, photographs. Garrett and Sloane at restaurants, in a car, walking into a hotel, intimate, unmistakable. Each one time-stamped, going back 11 months. Before the pregnancy, before the gala, before Charlotte had any reason to suspect. At the bottom of the stack, a typed note on plain white paper. He doesn't deserve you. Everything you need is here. Charlotte spread the photos on the kitchen table, looked at each one, her husband's face in each frame, smiling, relaxed. The face of a man living a life she wasn't part of. She turned the note over, blank. Who had sent this? Russell Pennington called Charlotte on a Thursday morning. We've identified the source of the anonymous photographs, he said. The private investigator who took them is licensed in Ohio. His client paid in cash and personal checks. The checks were drawn on an account belonging to Douglas Ray Aldridge. Charlotte set down her tea. Douglas? Garrett's father. He hired a private investigator, out of his own savings. He's been building this file for 2 months. Charlotte sat with this for a long time. Douglas Aldridge, the man who changed oil and rotated tires in a 2-bay garage in Dayton, Ohio. A man who probably took home $60,000 in a good year, who wore flannel shirts and work boots and called everyone friend. A man who had spent his retirement savings on a private investigator to document his own son's betrayal. To protect a daughter-in-law he barely knew, because it was the right thing to do. Charlotte called Douglas that evening. She sat on the porch. The air was cool. Autumn was coming early this year. The maple tree in the yard was just starting to turn. Green at the center, gold at the edges. "I got your photographs, Douglas." Silence. Then a sound she didn't expect. A grown man crying, not dramatically, quietly. The way men of his generation cry. Suppressed, reluctant, ashamed of the tears even as they fall. "I raised him better than this," Douglas said. "Or I thought I did. His mother left when he was 9, walked out on a Tuesday morning. Said she was going to the store and never came back. I raised that boy alone. Worked doubles to keep the lights on. Drove him to every practice. Sat in the front row at every game." He paused, blew his nose. "When he brought that girl to my shop last spring and introduced her as a friend, I knew. I looked at him and I saw his mother. The same lies, the same selfishness, the same ability to look someone they love straight in the eye and betray them. Douglas, I hired the investigator in July. Used the money I'd been saving for a new engine hoist. Don't need a new hoist. I needed my conscience clear." His voice steadied. "If you need me to testify, I will. In court, under oath, against my own son, for my grandchild." Charlotte pressed her palm to her chest. Her heart beat against it. Strong, steady. "Thank you, Douglas," she said. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. Someone had to be the man my son refused to be." The next morning, Charlotte did something she hadn't done in months. She opened her closet. Not to get dressed, to excavate. She started sorting, pile by pile, hanger by hanger. The designer dresses Garrett liked her to wear. Too tight across the chest, too short for comfort, chosen for how they made him look, not how they made her feel. Donate. The strapless black number he bought for his firm's Christmas party. "You need to show some skin, Lottie. These are important people. Donate." The silk blouse that cost $800 and made her feel like she was wearing someone else's body. Donate. The flat shoes he called frumpy. Keep. The oversized sweater her mother gave her that Garrett said made her look like a college student. Keep. The jeans he said made her look like someone's mother. She looked down at her belly. She was going to be someone's mother. That wasn't an insult. That was the most important thing she'd ever do. Keep, keep, keep. By the time she finished, 3 garbage bags sat by the door for donation. Her closet was half empty, but for the first time, everything in it belonged to her. That afternoon, Charlotte went to the Prescott Foundation office. She hadn't been there in months. Garrett hadn't wanted her working during the pregnancy. "You should be resting, Lottie. The foundation can survive without you." Another way to isolate her. Another way to make her small. The office was on the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown. Edmund had given the foundation its own space, separate from his real estate business, because he believed charity should stand on its own. Charlotte had helped design the interior. Open floor plan, natural light, a wall of children's artwork, from the literacy programs she'd built. Bennett Cross met her in the lobby. Edmund's protege, 36, quiet eyes. The kind of man who entered a room without changing its energy. Not because he lacked presence, but because his presence was calm rather than demanding. He ran the foundation's daily operations and had been doing it well in Charlotte's absence. Charlotte, he smiled, warm, not performative. Your father said you might come by. The literacy report is on your desk. He handed her a coffee without being asked. Almond milk, 1 sugar. He remembered. Such a small thing. But after months of Garrett not remembering her coffee order, not caring enough to notice, the gesture hit Charlotte somewhere deep. For what it's worth, Bennett said as they walked to her office, your father talks about you like you hung the moon, and based on the literacy numbers from last year, I think he might be right. Charlotte sat at her desk, opened the reports, numbers, budgets, impact assessments. 3,200 children served through the literacy program she'd designed. 12 new library partnerships, a 91% participant satisfaction rate. She wasn't worthless. She had never been worthless. The word was so small, so fragile. It crumbled under the weight of 3,200 children who could read because of her. 2 days later, Edmund summoned Charlotte to his study. Everything was ready. Russell had prepared the legal documents, the divorce filing, the asset protection orders, the criminal referral for forgery and fraud, the forensic accounting report, Douglas Aldridge's photographs, Charlotte's screenshots of Garrett's texts and emails. But Edmund had one more piece of information. The forged co-guarantee on Victor Hale's loan, Russell said. We've had it analyzed by 2 independent handwriting experts. Both confirm it's not Charlotte's signature. Both are prepared to testify. The federal prosecutor's office has accepted the referral. Garrett is looking at forgery charges. Minimum 2 years. Suddenly, Charlotte absorbed this. Her husband could go to prison, the father of her unborn child. Are you sure? She asked Edmund. Not asking for permission, asking for certainty. Sweetheart, Edmund said, he forged your name. He stole your money. He used your pregnancy to manipulate you. He put your life and the baby's life at risk. He brought a predatory lender to our family's doorstep. Certainty isn't the question. The question is timing. He leaned forward. There will be one final event. The Foundation's emergency fundraiser for children's hospitals. 2 weeks from Saturday, every important person in the city will attend, and that is where Garrett Aldridge will learn the price of calling my daughter worthless. Charlotte looked at her father, at his steady eyes, his folded hands, the grandfather clock ticking behind him. Okay, she said. And this time, the word meant something. Charlotte spent the next 2 weeks becoming the woman Garrett thought she was, quiet, grateful, obedient. She cooked his favorite meals, rubbed his shoulders when he came home, laughed at his jokes, complimented his tie. Each kindness was a brick in a wall he couldn't see. Each smile was a lock on a door he didn't know was closing. Behind the scenes, everything moved with precision. Russell filed the divorce papers, sealed by the court, not yet served. Charlotte moved her personal assets into a prenatal trust for the baby, supervised by Russell and co-signed by Edmund. The trust was ironclad. Garrett would have no claim. The forensic accountant froze the joint accounts and flagged the unauthorized transfers. Garrett's access was restricted, but not severed. Enough to notice something was wrong, not enough to trace it back to Charlotte. The criminal complaint moved through the federal prosecutor's office. Forgery, fraud, Wire fraud related to the loan documentation. A U.S. Marshal was assigned to serve the papers. Edmund coordinated the timing with a general's patience. Everything would happen at once, at the gala, in public, because Edmund understood something about men like Garrett. Their power existed only in the shadows. Drag them into the light, and they had nothing. 3 days before the gala, Garrett's credit card was declined at lunch. Charlotte knew this because Margot was there. At the restaurant, 2 tables away. Not a coincidence. Margot had been tracking Garrett's lunch schedule for a week. He tried 3 times, Margot reported by phone. Then he excused himself to the bathroom, probably calling the bank. Sloan paid for lunch. You should have seen his face. Garrett came home that evening, agitated, but hiding it. He checked his phone constantly, opened his laptop, closed it, checked his phone again. "Everything okay?" Charlotte asked from the kitchen. Gentle, concerned. "Fine," he said. "Just some bank thing. Security review or something. Happens sometimes." "I'm sure it's nothing," Charlotte replied. "Oh, by the way, so, are you excited about Saturday? The foundation gala. Daddy's been planning something special." He looked up, relaxed slightly. "Yeah, sure. Should be a good night." Charlotte dried a dish, set it in the cabinet, aligned it with the others, and smiled. The night before the gala, Charlotte stood in front of her bathroom mirror. 8 months pregnant now, the final stretch. Dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could hide. Hair she hadn't styled properly in weeks. Hands that were slightly swollen. Feet that ached by noon. She looked at herself, really looked, not through Garrett's eyes. The eyes that saw a body to control, a fortune to steal, a woman to diminish, not through society's eyes. The eyes that measured worth in dress size and dinner party performance, through her own eyes. "There you are," she whispered to her reflection. "I've been looking for you." The woman in the mirror didn't look worthless. She looked tired. She looked fierce. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and discovered she was fireproof. She went to the nursery, sat in the rocking chair, took out a sheet of stationery and a pen. Not a text, not an email, a letter, in ink, on paper, because some things need to be written by hand. The pen scratched against the paper. The nursery was quiet. Moonlight came through the curtains and painted stripes across the carpet. Charlotte's handwriting was steady, clear. "Dear little one," she wrote, "by the time you read this, you'll know the story, or some version of it. The version I tell you will leave out the worst parts and keep the best ones. Here's what I want you to know right now, before you arrive, before everything changes again." She wrote 3 pages, about strength, about worth, about the difference between being loved and being owned, about Prescott women and what they're made of. She folded the letter into 3 parts, tucked it into the pocket of the stuffed elephant on the changing table, the gray one, the soft one, the one she bought the day she saw 2 lines. "Someday," she whispered, "I'll read this to you, and you'll know your mama was brave, even when she didn't feel brave, especially then." Gala morning, Charlotte stood in her bedroom, 3 dresses laid on the bed. 2 were Garrett's choices. Designer, tight, low cut, chosen to display her like a trophy. The 3rd was the one she and Vivian had picked together last week. Cream-colored, floor-length, empire waist that draped over her belly like flowing water. Elegant, powerful. Hers. She chose the cream. Vivian arrived to help her dress. She clasped a diamond necklace around Charlotte's neck. A cascade of small stones that caught the light like captured starlight. "This was my mother's," Vivian said. "She wore it the day she told your grandfather she was leaving him for your real grandfather, the man she actually loved. The man who deserved her." Vivian met Charlotte's eyes in the mirror. Prescott women don't break, Charlotte. We transform. Charlotte arrived at the Grand Regent Hotel at 6:45. The ballroom was already filling. 600 guests tonight, larger than the usual annual gala. Edmund had expanded the invitation list. He wanted witnesses. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, white roses on every table, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. The same ballroom where, 4 weeks ago, Garrett had called her worthless. Charlotte walked in with her head high and her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, once, twice, as if to say, I'm ready to. Edmund was already there. Silver suit, navy tie, standing near the podium, reviewing notes with the event coordinator. He looked up when Charlotte and Shore entered. Their eyes met across the room. He nodded. Just once. Just slightly. Russell Pennington sat at the head table, looking like any other guest, except for the thin leather briefcase at his feet and the phone in his hand, open to a contact labeled Eubs Marshall Stevens. Margot was near the bar, dressed in black, watching the entrance, and in the kitchen, through the service door, a man in a dark suit waited. Patient, professional, a folded document in his inside pocket. Garrett arrived at 7:15. Sloane Whitfield walked in 4 minutes later, seated at a different table, but close enough to catch his eye. Garrett wore his best suit, his most confident smile. He had no idea this was the last night of his old life. He walked to Charlotte, kissed her cheek, put his hand on her belly. For the photographer. You look amazing, Lottie, he said, and for once it sounded almost sincere, as if some part of him, buried deep beneath the lies and the schemes and the forged signatures, remembered what it felt like to actually love her. Charlotte smiled. Thank you. It's going to be a wonderful night. The ballroom filled by 7:30. 600 guests in evening wear. Crystal catching candlelight. The hum of conversation. The clink of glasses. The rustle of silk. Waiters glided between tables with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The string quartet shifted from Vivaldi to something softer. The room smelled like roses and expensive cologne and the particular electricity of old money gathered in one place. Edmund took the stage at 7:45. He moved the way he always moved, unhurried, certain. He adjusted the microphone, surveyed the room. 600 faces looking up at him. Donors, executives, politicians, society figures, people who wrote checks with many zeros, people whose opinions could build or destroy a reputation in a single phone call. Good evening, Edmund said. His voice was warm, steady, the voice of a man who had addressed rooms like this 1,000 times. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we're raising funds for 3 new children's hospital wings across the state. Every dollar tonight goes directly to care. No overhead, no administration, straight to the children who need it most. Applause, genuine. Edmund had earned the city's trust over decades of transparent philanthropy. When Edmund Prescott said, every dollar went to care, it did. He spoke for 8 minutes about the foundation's work. The numbers. The impact. The stories. A 6-year-old girl who received heart surgery through the foundation's fund. A 10-year-old boy who learned to read through the literacy program Charlotte designed. A teenager who received cancer treatment because the foundation covered what insurance wouldn't. Charlotte watched from the head table. Garrett sat beside her, his hand on her knee. Proprietary, not affectionate, the hand of a man who owns something and wants others to know. Sloane Whitfield sat 3 tables away. Red dress, again. Charlotte wondered if that was the only color she owned. Edmund paused, set down his notes, removed his reading glasses, folded them, placed them in his breast pocket, The room noticed. Edmund Prescott, going off script, was like watching a surgeon put down the scalpel. It meant something unexpected was about to happen. "Before we continue," Edmund said, "I'd like to share something personal." The murmur quieted. 600 people leaned in. "Most of you know my daughter, Charlotte. Some of you have known her since she was a child. You've watched her grow up. You've watched her build the Foundation's literacy program from scratch. You've watched her raise nearly $500,000 in independent fundraising last year alone." Charlotte's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Not yet. Not like this. "Charlotte chose to marry for love," Edmund continued. "Not for dynasty, not for strategy, for love. I respected that choice, even when it cost her. Even when I watched the man she chose slowly, systematically diminish her in ways only a father notices." Garrett's hand stiffened on Charlotte's knee. Edmund's eyes found Garrett across the ballroom. Found him and held him, the way a spotlight holds an actor who's suddenly forgotten his lines. 4 weeks ago, at this very event, in this very room, my son-in-law stood at this podium and called my daughter worthless. A murmur. Sharp. Like the intake of breath before a plunge. Worthless. Edmund repeated the word. Let it hang in the chandelier light. Let every person in the room hear it, feel it. An interesting word. Let me tell you what worthless actually looks like. Edmund pressed a button on the podium. Behind him, the large projection screen, normally used for Foundation impact photos, flickered to life. The first document appeared, enlarged, clear, unmistakable. "Worthless," Edmund said, "is forging your pregnant wife's signature on a $300,000 loan from a predatory lender." The forged co-guarantee filled the screen. Charlotte's name, the angular C that wasn't hers, the handwriting expert's annotation in red. Garrett stood up. His chair scraped the floor. The sound cut through the ballroom like a knife on glass. "Now wait," he started. Edmund continued, as if Garrett hadn't spoken. "Worthless is systematically siphoning $87,000 from your joint household account while your wife carries your child." The spreadsheet appeared. 114 transfers, dates, amounts, the bank's verification stamp. The room had gone completely silent, not the polite silence of attention, the shocked silence of 600 people witnessing a man being dissected by his own father-in-law in front of everyone he's ever tried to impress. "Worthless," Edmund said, and his voice dropped lower, quieter, more devastating for its softness, "is documenting your pregnant wife's emotional responses to create a false narrative of instability, to build a custody case, to take her child." The behavior log appeared on screen. Garrett's own words, his own dates, his own calculated notes about Charlotte's tears and fears and sleepless nights. Every intimate vulnerability weaponized. Charlotte looked at Garrett. His face was white. His mouth was open. His hands hung at his sides like he'd forgotten how to use them. "And worthless," Edmund said, straightening to his full height, "is bringing your mistress to your father-in-law's charity gala and thinking no one would notice." Every head in the room turned toward Sloane Whitfield. She sat frozen in her red dress, a deer in 600 headlights. Her wine glass trembled in her hand. Edmund turned to face Garrett directly. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 62 years of building something from nothing and watching a small man try to steal. "This big boss steal it. You married my daughter and thought you married her money. You were wrong. Charlotte's worth has nothing to do with me. She built this foundation's literacy program from the ground up. She has personally raised $467,000 for children's hospitals this year. She carries your child while you plot to take everything from her." He paused. The grandfather clock in the hallway outside ticked into the silence. "Charlotte Prescott is the most valuable person in this room, and you, Garrett, are the only worthless thing at this table." 600 people didn't breathe. Garrett looked wildly around the room, searching for an ally, a sympathetic face, someone, anyone, who might believe him. He found nothing but the reflected light of his own exposure. He straightened his tie, a reflex. The gesture of a man who has lost everything and reaches for the only thing he can still control. "This is... You can't just..." Garrett sputtered. The service door opened. The man in the dark suit stepped forward. "Garrett Michael Aldridge?" The voice was professional, calm, final. Garrett turned. "I'm United States Marshal David Stevens. I'm serving you with a petition for divorce, a temporary restraining order, and a federal summons to appear before the district court on charges of forgery and wire fraud." The marshal handed him the documents. Garrett took them. His hands shook so badly, the papers rattled. The ballroom remained silent. 600 people watched a man's life collapse in real time, watched the papers tremble in his hands, watched the color drain from his face in stages, pink to white to gray. Charlotte sat at the table. She didn't stand, didn't speak, didn't gloat. She placed both hands on her belly and felt her daughter kick. Strong and steady, as if the baby knew. Across the room, Sloane Whitfield was moving toward the exit. Fast, head down, red dress vanishing through the crowd. She made it to the lobby doors before Margot stepped into her path. Margot held a glass of champagne, smiled the kind of smile that women reserve for the specific circumstance of confronting the woman who slept with their best friend's husband. "Going somewhere?" Margot asked. Sloane looked at Margot, at the closed doors behind her, at the 600 people in the ballroom who would be talking about this night for years. "I didn't know he was..." Sloane started. "You knew," Margot said, simply, factually. "You knew because you Googled her. You knew because you posted pictures from their anniversary restaurant. You knew because Mrs. Aldridge, by Christmas, doesn't happen by accident." Sloane's chin trembled. Whatever she'd imagined when she started this affair, it wasn't this. It wasn't being publicly identified at a charity gala in front of 600 of the city's most powerful people. She walked past Margot without another word. Her heels clicked rapidly on the marble. The lobby doors closed behind her. Garrett was escorted from the ballroom by the marshal and 2 hotel security officers. He didn't resist. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at Charlotte. He walked out with the papers in his hand and the weight of 600 stares on his back. The doors closed. Edmund returned to the microphone. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, and he smiled, the real smile, the warm one. "Now, where were we?" "Ah, yes, children's hospitals." The gala continued, because Edmund Prescott didn't let anyone, especially not Garrett Aldridge, ruin an evening dedicated to sick children. The band played, the champagne flowed, and the donations poured in. The highest total in the foundation's 20-year history, $2.7 million. Everyone in the room wanted to write a check for the man who had just shown them what a real father looks like. Charlotte stepped outside at 9:30. The terrace overlooked the city lights. The air was cool and clean after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. She breathed, really breathed, the kind of breath that fills your lungs so completely it aches. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Bennett Cross stood in the terrace doorway. He held a glass of water, not champagne, water. "Thought you might need this," he said. Held it out. Charlotte took it. Drank. Felt the cold water trace a line down her chest. "Are you okay?" Bennett asked. Charlotte looked at the city, at the lights stretching to the horizon. at the dark spaces between them, at the sky above, where 3 stars were visible, despite the light pollution. "You know what's strange?" she said. "I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought I'd feel vindicated. But I just feel—" She searched for the word. "Free." Bennett nodded. He didn't try to fill the silence, didn't offer wisdom or comfort or a shoulder. He just stood beside her and let the word breathe. "I think I'm going to be okay," Charlotte said, and for the first time in months, she believed it. 1 week later, Charlotte sat on the porch of her brownstone. The air had turned. October now. The maple in the yard was fully gold. Leaves drifted down like slow-motion confetti, settling on the walkway in patterns that looked almost intentional, as if the tree were decorating for something. Garrett was gone. Not metaphorically, physically, legally, completely gone. He'd been removed from the house by court order within 24 hours of the gala. His belongings, the suits, the watches, the cologne that smelled like someone else's story, had been packed by a moving service and sent to a storage unit. The guest room he'd chosen to sleep in was empty now. Charlotte had repainted it, soft green, a reading room, hers. He was staying at a motel off the highway, room 112. Margot knew the number because the desk clerk was a friend of a friend. Sloane had broken it off the morning after the gala, packed her things, and transferred to a branch office in another state. Turned out, Mrs. Aldridge, by Christmas, had a different timeline when Mrs. Aldridge didn't come with billions attached. Garrett's firm had terminated him within 48 hours of the fraud charges becoming public. Financial services companies don't keep employees who forge signatures. It's bad for the brand. Victor Hale's operation was under investigation by the Financial Crimes Division. Russell had forwarded the forensic accounting to the federal prosecutor. 7 other families, 7 other forged documents. Garrett was the thread that unraveled the whole thing. The prosecutors were grateful. This didn't help Garrett. Charlotte sipped her tea. Decaf now, doctor's orders. She watched the leaves fall and felt something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Nothing. Not sadness, not anger, not relief, just nothing. The kind of nothing that comes after a storm. The eerie, gentle stillness when the wind dies and the rain stops, and the world is just wet and quiet and clean. The doorbell rang. Charlotte set down her tea and opened the door. Douglas Aldridge stood on her porch. He wore a clean flannel shirt. The nicest one he owned, she guessed. His work boots were polished. He held a Tupperware container in one hand and a folded bundle in the other. "I drove 16 hours, he said. Might have gotten a speeding ticket in Pennsylvania. Haven't checked." Charlotte opened the door wider. "Come in, Douglas." He stepped inside, looked around the brownstone as if seeing it for the first time. He probably was. Garrett hadn't invited his father often. Douglas didn't fit the image Garrett was constructing. They sat at the kitchen table. Douglas placed the Tupperware between them. "Chicken soup," he said. "My mother's recipe. She made it every time something went wrong. When my wife left, when the shop flooded, when Garrett broke his arm at Little League." He paused. "Figured this qualifies." Charlotte opened the container. The smell hit her immediately. Rich. Warm. The kind of smell that doesn't come from a recipe so much as from a history, from a woman standing at a stove, from decades of ordinary kindness repeated until it becomes extraordinary. "And this," Douglas said, unfolding the bundle. A baby blanket, cream-colored, hand-knitted, slightly uneven in places, soft from years of storage and careful washing. "My mother made this for her first grandchild," Douglas said. "She died before she got to meet one. I've been keeping it in a cedar chest for 20 years. It was always meant for this baby. Garrett doesn't get to ruin that too." Charlotte held the blanket, pressed it to her face. It smelled like cedar and wool and a grandmother she would never meet, but somehow, through this blanket, already knew. "Thank you, Douglas," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You need to know that there's at least one Aldridge who turned out decent, and your baby is going to know that too." On Saturday, Margot came over. They sat on the porch with decaf coffee and a box of pastries from the Italian bakery on 7th Street. The kind with custard inside and powdered sugar that gets on your fingers and your shirt and somehow your left eyebrow. They didn't talk about Garrett for the first 20 minutes. They talked about Margot's sister's dog, who had eaten an entire sofa cushion. They talked about the new Thai restaurant that allegedly gave someone's husband food poisoning. They talked about nothing, and it was the best conversation Charlotte had in months. Then the silence came, the natural one, the one that settles between two people who have something real to discuss and are gathering the courage. "I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen," Charlotte said. "What you did. The 3 months." Margot nodded. She set down her coffee. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. "I know. I understand why you did it. I even believe you thought you were protecting me. But understanding isn't the same as trusting. And trust is going to take time. I know that too. I'm not ready to call you my best friend again. Not yet. But I'm ready to call you my friend. And I'm ready to see if we can build from there." Margot's eyes filled. She blinked rapidly, pressed her lips together, nodded. They didn't hug, but Charlotte pushed the pastry box toward Margot, and Margot took one. And they sat on the porch in the October sun and ate pastries with powdered sugar on their fingers. That was enough for now. People ask me if I'm angry. I was. God, I was furious. The kind of fury that doesn't sleep and doesn't eat and replays every lie on a loop at 3 in the morning. But anger is exhausting, and I have a baby to grow, so I chose to be strategic instead. Turns out, clarity is more powerful than rage. Rage makes you swing wild. Clarity makes you aim. Monday morning, the Prescott Foundation office. Charlotte at her desk by 8:30. The literacy report needed review. The hospital wing proposals needed signatures. The quarterly donor newsletter needed editing. Normal work. Important work. The kind of work that reminds you that your hands were made for building, not for ringing. Bennett knocked on her open door at 10 with a cup of tea. Almond milk, 1 sugar. "The Children's Hospital Board wants to name the new wing," he said. "They're asking for your input." "The Prescott family wing," Charlotte said without hesitation. "Not the Edmund Prescott wing." "No, family. Because that's what it's about. Not one person. The whole family. Including the newest member." She rested her hand on her belly. Bennett smiled. He lingered for a moment in the doorway, not awkwardly, comfortably, the way someone lingers when they enjoy where they are. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think worthless is the last word anyone in this city would use to describe you, especially after Saturday night." Charlotte looked up. His eyes were warm, unguarded. He wasn't performing, wasn't strategizing, wasn't trying to impress. He was just a man standing in a doorway, telling a woman something true. "Thank you, Bennett," she said. He nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. "The donor newsletter," he said. "You misspelled rehabilitation on page 3. 2 B's." Charlotte laughed. A real laugh. The first one in so long that the sound surprised her. It came from somewhere deep and honest, and it shook loose something that had been lodged in her chest for months. "I'll fix it," she said. "I already did," Bennett replied, and walked away. Charlotte sat in the quiet of her office, the children's artwork on the wall, 3,200 kids who could read because of a program she designed. A hospital wing that would bear her family's name. A foundation that existed because her father believed in building things that mattered. Not worthless, never worthless. The word dissolved like sugar in water. Present for a moment, gone the next, leaving only sweetness behind. Wednesday evening, late. Charlotte drove home from the foundation office. The city was doing that thing it does in early October, the light going golden an hour before sunset, painting everything in warm amber. The buildings looked like they were glowing from inside. She passed the Grand Regent Hotel, the place where it started, the place where it ended. She glanced at it through the car window, the same stone facade, the same brass doors, the same awning with the hotel's name in gold script. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't feel the familiar tightening in her chest. She just saw a building, a place where something happened. Not a prison, not a monument to her worst moment, just a building. She kept driving. The woman who walked into that gala 4 weeks ago wouldn't recognize the woman driving past it now. Same face, same name, same diamond earrings her mother clasped on that terrible night. But a different spine, straighter, stronger, made of something that hadn't existed before and couldn't be broken now. At home, Charlotte went to the nursery. The moon was coming up. Fat, full, silver, it poured through the window and made the pale yellow walls glow like candlelight. She sat in the rocking chair. The creak, the rhythm, the smell of fresh paint and baby lotion. She pulled the stuffed elephant from the changing table and held it in her lap, felt the folded letter in its pocket. She took the letter out, unfolded it, and read it aloud. Not for herself, for the baby, dear little one. Her voice was steady, clear. By the time you read this, you'll know the story. Some of it, anyway. The version I'll tell you leaves out the worst parts and keeps the best ones. That's not dishonesty. That's motherhood. Choosing which truths to share and which ones to carry alone. The baby shifted, rolled, settled deeper into her pelvis, as if leaning in to listen. Here's what I want you to know. Your mother was called worthless by the man who was supposed to love her most, and instead of believing him, she became the most valuable person in her own story. The rocking chair creaked, the mobile turned, silver stars catching moonlight. You come from strong women, little one. Your grandmother Vivian, who wears pearls like armor and never once let a man define her. Your great-grandmother, who walked away from a bad marriage with nothing but a diamond necklace and the courage to start over. And me, your mama, who sat on a bathroom floor at a gala and decided that the word of one weak man would not be the word that defined her. Charlotte paused, touched the blanket Douglas had brought, cream-colored, hand-knitted, 20 years of waiting folded into soft wool. You also come from a good man, not your father, your grandfather Douglas, a mechanic from Ohio who spent his retirement savings to do the right thing, who drove 16 hours to bring you a baby blanket and your great-grandmother's chicken soup. Remember that. The blood doesn't matter. The character does. She folded the letter, placed it back in the elephant's pocket. That's my wish for you, little one. Not that life won't knock you down. It will. Everyone gets knocked down. But that when it does, you remember whose daughter you are. Not because of the money, not because of the name, because of the spine. You come from women who transform. She set the elephant back on the changing table, adjusted it so it faced the crib, waiting for its owner. Welcome to the family. The grandfather clock ticked. Edmund had it moved from his study to the nursery last week. Charlotte hadn't asked him to. He just did it. Had 2 men carry it up the stairs and place it in the corner, between the bookshelf and the window. Every Prescott needs a clock, Edmund said, when she asked why. Reminds you to be patient. Reminds you that time passes, that the worst hours end, that the best ones are always coming. Charlotte listened to it now. The steady, reliable rhythm, tick, 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 the same sound that had filled her father's study for 30 years, the sound that had counted the seconds while she sat in the leather chair as a 5-year-old, as a teenager, as a woman with a broken marriage and a baby on the way and a life that had been shattered and rebuilt into something stronger than it was before. The clock ticked. The baby kicked. Charlotte placed her hand on her belly, felt the strength there, the life, the future. Everything she had fought for, compressed into a space the size of a watermelon, getting ready to enter the world. She smiled, not the smile she'd worn for Garrett. The performance, the mask, the careful arrangement of features designed to hide the truth. This smile came from somewhere real, from somewhere that had been dormant and was waking up, from the place where worth lives, not the kind that's measured in dollars or defined by other people's words, but the kind that exists because you decided it does, because you looked at yourself in a mirror and said, "There you are," and meant it. The clock ticked. Steady, patient, reliable. The baby kicked. Strong, insistent, ready. And Charlotte Prescott, never Aldridge, never again, was worth everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real emotional value and life lessons. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.